So our brisket is exactly where we want it. Good shape, nice amount of fat right there. It's ready to go. Are you frustrated with learning how to trim the perfect brisket for your backyard? If you're like me, you probably scoured YouTube and looked for lots of tutorials. Are you supposed to do restaurant trim? Do you need to do a competition trim? What's best for your backyard? Chances are you're not a competitive cook and you just want to make some good brisket for your family. Well, my name is Jason Selva, here from Beat Down Barbecue. And over the past year, I've cooked well over 1,000 briskets. Started selling barbecue to keep my martial arts gym going. That's why it's called Beat Down Barbecue. During the lockdowns, it was a way that we kept our coaches paid. And now I want to go ahead and give back a little bit and teach you guys what I've learned. When I first started, doing barbecue a long time ago, YouTube wasn't around. And even after that, I was looking through YouTube and it was just really frustrating. You see so many different things. And if you're on TikTok, you see things that are even worse. And don't even get me started with Instagram. People do stuff on there just to get attention. So what is exactly going to work for you? Well, 1,000 briskets later, I'm going to show you what I've learned and hopefully give you some tips that you can use to rock your next backyard barbecue. Let's get started. All right, before you get started, there's going to be a couple things that you're going to need. First off, a sharp knife. Now, you don't have to get fancy. I bought this one at the store for like $7. I've had expensive knives, and in my experience, a little cheap 6-inch boning knife is all that you need. You're also going to need a cutting board that's big enough to hold this whole brisket. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the bag. Now, you need to be a little bit careful. So right here, I'm going to get my knife and I'm going to put it along the Deco Fat as I open up the bag. The reason being is if I just slice all the way down like this, I might actually cut into the meat. So let's go ahead and do that. So my knife's going to go ahead and come down this way. That's going to allow me to open up this bag right here and not have to worry about cutting any of that meat open, so we can have a beautiful presentation. Now you need to be a little bit careful. This is a prime brisket and there are a lot of juices that are in there. So go ahead, cut it open. Now, in the interest of keeping everything clean, we're going to go ahead and remove it and make sure that we don't get those juices in the bottom. That's called the purge. We're in an outdoor setting here. If you were doing this, the last thing you would want to do is do this in your sink. Bacteria can get everywhere. We don't want any of that, especially after the past year. So you're going to go ahead, remove the brisket out, okay? Leave the bag how it is, and I always keep a trash can right next to me. So let's go ahead and break down the anatomy of a brisket. So right here we have a hard piece of fat. The goal during this trim is to leave stuff only that's edible. You're going to be a little bit different than a restaurant, and you're not quite a barbecue competitor. Barbecue competitors are only focused with these center cuts right here. Those are the presentations that they give to the judges. Restaurants are going to be a lot more aggressive in their trim, because when you're doing 12, 24 briskets at a time, you need to trim them all so that they're similar in size so they can all finish at the same time. Also, they're going to be cutting in front of customers. You want the slices to be, presentable. So what they'll do is they'll have a really aggressive rounded trim because they use their stuff for burgers and for sausages. Maybe you're going to do that. I'm not sure. I'm going to do it today for you how I would do it if I was cooking for my family. So right here we have this Deco Fat. What I need to do is I need to go ahead and remove this. Now if I have my fingers along this way, you can see there's kind of like a little bit of a seam, right? And sometimes it'll come off just like that, how I'm doing it. So right here, it's going to go ahead and remove that Deco Fat right there. And if you don't get it all in one cut, it's okay. But this is why it's important to make sure that you have a sharp knife. So we got that fat right there. It's not really edible. Let's go ahead and toss it. Or you can go ahead and use it for tallow. It's up to you. But right now we're going to go ahead and toss that sucker. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get this down here. Going to go ahead and trim it. Now let's look at the anatomy of this brisket. We have two muscles. There's the point here, that's where the burnt end comes, or the fatty, and then we also have the lean. Now if you pay attention, you're going to see there are edges of the brisket that look like they're cooked. And that's because when they finish off the briskets at the meat packing plant, they almost do a little bit of a pasteurization process. They go ahead and hit it with hot water. We're going to go ahead and remove anything that's not what? That's not edible. So over on the top here, you'll see some silver skin. Some people get crazy and really remove all of the fat on there. My experience, it doesn't make that much of a difference. So here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to go remove anything that's discolored and not edible. So the way we're going to go ahead and do that is just kind of just trim a little bit of that off right here. We'll get to that other part in a second. Right here, let's go ahead and remove that a little bit at an angle. If I was doing a restaurant trim, I'd get super aggressive here, but my goal is just to, you know what? The way that's looking, I'm just going to go ahead and do one of these moves right here. Small little cut. We're going to go ahead and remove that a little bit. If you wanted to, what I do sometimes with this meat is throw it in some sriracha sauce, make it Asian, and eat it. So what I'm doing right now, and the reason why I did that cut the way I did, is I also want to see how much fat here. That's going to give me an idea of how much I got to trim. So let's go ahead and get some of this stuff off here off the top. Okay, just a little bit. Get some of that silver skin. It's going to help the rub stick a little bit better. And that's all we're going to do that side. Over on the top side here, we have our big layer of fat. You're going to see two muscles here again. Sometimes this muscle here will be on. Sometimes it'll be off. Some people call it the mohawk. Some people call it a little bit of the ear. That's where you get your good burn ends out of. So what we're going to do now is let's kind of take a look, and we're going to go ahead and give this a little bit of a trim. I'm going to remove some of this right here, try to make it a little aerodynamic. And what I like to do is I'll cut it at an angle down like this a little bit. That'll make things tiny bit easier for me. All right, so now we have the top side here, the brisket. One of the benefits to doing that cut, how we did earlier, is I get to see how much fat's on here. Sometimes the briskets behave good, the cow does a good job, and there's not that much fat to trim. And that's the case. We're looking for about maybe like a 1/4 inch of fat. So this is the lean, that's the fatty up here. Depending on what you're doing, it's going to dictate how you do the trim. If I'm making burnt ends out of my brisket, I'm going to trim off all the fat. Today we're doing something real basic. So I'm just going to go ahead, come in here, and just kind of trim a little bit of the top. Going to get about a 1/4 inch. Now, one of the things that a lot of people mess up on when they do a brisket trim is that this little section of fat right here. A lot of times I'll be on YouTube, I'll be on Instagram, I see some beautiful slices, they get to that mid lean and there's a big glob of fat. So what you're going to want to do is just kind of like come down at an angle out this way and remove that glob that you have right there. So come here, kind of trim. Your goal on this is to try to make it about as even as possible. There are some people that won't even trim anything at all, and that's okay. And if you mess up and you end up seeing a little bit of the meat right there, it's okay too. Just gonna go ahead, keep trimming this down. You can also give it a little look-see right here. You can elevate. Okay, so like I was saying, we were trimming up there. Switch the camera angle there for you guys. You want to just go ahead and even it out. And sometimes if you kind of mess up a little bit, do that on purpose so you guys can see and expose that, that's okay too. So about a 1/4 inch of fat. Like I said, this brisket was behaving pretty well. If you want to make it look aesthetic a little bit, you could go ahead and just give it a slight little bit of a trim right there. Round that edge off a little bit. Anything else you want to go ahead and clean up, anything really that's kind of like hanging off a little bit. Flip it over on this side, give it another check. One of the things that you're going to want to do is kind of smooth this part out there. This glob of fat can get a little bit messy on you, so you're going to go ahead and just try to even that sucker out a little bit. Remember, we're just moving stuff that is not edible and making it good for your family and for your friends. We can go ahead and trim off a little bit of fat right there. Make sure things are nice and even. Go ahead, double check your work. Remember, double check that little glob of fat that we have right there. Kind of smooth things out a little bit. It's a little hanger on that we got. And this brisket is good to go. And at this point, you'd be ready to go. Now, what some people like to do is to make sure that you expose only the new meat. So if you wanted to, you could do a small little light trim right here. Okay? Just remove a little bit. That's going to go ahead and expose the new flesh over to the smoke. But this brisket is ready to roll. So our brisket is exactly where we want it. Good shape, nice amount of fat right there. It's ready to go.